It's the traditional 3 minutes after the hour, so let's get started. Welcome everybody to the July 17th SIG Multicluster call. And the first and only topic so far on the agenda is whether to relax the conflict condition on MCS API. Yeah, go for it. Is it Jean? How'd you say your name?
Yeah, I'm here. So yeah, I just want to bring up because recently I see the conformance test was merged, but it checks two conditions from two cluster for the conflicted condition as today's KP statement. Yeah, but I remember we want to relax the KP because in reality, not each implementation will change even the existing service exported to the conflict condition. So in the link I shared, I mentioned there are two. I think the most reason is for the other cluster invalid one, we should not stop the existing exporting traffic. So that's a very important reason. And yeah, I feel like actually Thomas mentions that it was discussed in the SIG meeting, but I didn't see the notes. So I don't know what's the reason why we don't want to relax the KP anymore. So yeah, I want to bring up that and to hear other implementations feedback.
Yeah. So I'm just going over the conformance test itself just now, and I think it's still only checking one cluster, the one that creates the conflicting service. So the discussion so ignoring the CAP for the time being, the discussion in the PR itself on the conformance tests was about whether the suggested PR should be changed to check across the board.
So originally,
oh right, no, yeah, so yeah, originally, yeah, no, I see
one.
line 346 and 347. It does check both.
Yeah, now
Yeah.
it's changed. It was changed to check both. So
yeah,
I asked the reason why in the PR itself, and Thomas mentions that there were some pushback from the SIG. So that's the things
right. Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that what had actually been merged, because it got merged. Well, I was a bit surprised that it went in just like that, but that's how things are with LGTMs and approve. But anyway, we can revisit that later if we change the KEP. So currently the conformance test is aligned with the KEP, and the reason there was pushback in the call, I think 10 days ago, is essentially that so Jeremy said that the reason the KEP was written in this way, where all the service imports are supposed to have the conflicting conditions, service exports are supposed to have the conflicting conditions, is that the goal was to avoid having to look at all the clusters when something goes wrong. So if you export a service and there's a conflict, there's no way to know which cluster creates the conflict. So if you think about this, when you're doing it manually, you go to a cluster, you create the service export. It's obvious the way we think about things that the last cluster is the conflicting one. But if you're creating service exports, possibly with slight variations, using automation of some kind, then it's impossible to know which one is the conflicting one, if there's even really a single cluster that can be identified as conflicting. And so the KEP wanted to avoid having to force people to go and connect all the clusters to find out which one is causing an issue, and um, I've lost my train of thought, sorry. Yeah, because it might not even be apparent. So if you have some automation somewhere that's creating a conflicting service export, then the way things currently work, you could end up in a situation where the service doesn't, you think your automation's exporting the service, but for whatever reason it doesn't work. But on the clusters that you're using, there's no indication that it's not working. And you don't really understand why. And so that's actually, I'm realizing now too that there's a missing piece in that. So if you have a cluster set with, let's say, half the clusters exporting a service and the other clusters consuming it, or all the clusters consuming it, you could be on a consuming cluster that doesn't have any service exports, and so you don't have any way of seeing what the errors are. But anyway, that's another concern. So essentially, there are two reasons to try, well, to want all the service exports to show the condition. The first is that you can't know which service export caused the conflict in the first place, which is why we resort to timestamp based sorting. And the second one is that you don't want to have to force users to go and look at all the exporting clusters to see, first, to see that there is something wrong, and second, to see what's wrong. Does that help with the context at least?
Yeah, I think it makes sense if we want to show the error to other cluster. So if there are some conflict there. But my concern is, for example, if the exported service has already running there and someone else create a conflicted uh service from another cluster, then it will stop all my traffic. So basically, it will cause the service down.
Yeah.
So in that case, I mean, in the reality, probably it's not acceptable. But I know there are some, yeah, I understand the concern you mentioned. I'm not sure, do we want to leave it to the implementation? I mean, the developer to decide whether it show the condition for all the clusters or whether we just relax that.
Yeah, well, so that's the point about keeping the traffic, well, the service available if it already was available. That's a good one to bring up. And so I'm not actually sure. Well, so relaxing the requirement would give that as a side effect. But maybe we want to be more explicit about it in the CAP. So what I can't remember offhand, but I'm wondering if the CAP says anything about the impact of conflicting service exports on existing service imports. See. And so, yeah, so the way Tom phrased it in his PR, that would allow that, because if we say, so just to, I'll share my screen, that might be better. Um, All right, so here, this was Tom's suggestion. So this is the old conflict resolution policy. So when a service export is created, if the service exports, all the service exports across the cluster set can't be merged, then all the service exports get a conflict condition. With a description of the conflict, and then it says the conflict will be resolved by assigning precedence based on each service export's creation timestamp from oldest to newest. So the resolution is separate from the requirement to set the conflicting conditions. And so that means, the way I understand it, let's see, you still have the service imports, but they are created based on so they are, yeah. Right, so it's, yeah, so it's not actually clear. Well, it's not explicit in the KEP what's supposed to happen if a service export has a conflicting condition. The way the resolution was supposed to happen, I think. Yeah, so, well, it's not explicit, but this gives the impression that you're still supposed to create service imports from them, but you start with the oldest service exports and continue as long as there isn't an actual conflict on the service import. But maybe we should make that explicit for the reason that you just mentioned, which is to keep existing services available.
Okay, so actually this statement is trying to say that the service import will use the first, how to resolve that conflict will be using the first service spec.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's how I understand it at least. But I think it's worth making explicit.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe would you be up to writing a pull request on the KEP to clarify that?
Sure, yeah, I can do
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I think it
Okay.
will confuse the consumers. So at least for me, when I read the cap, I was thinking that the conflict means the traffic should be stopped. Yeah, but
Yeah, it's not
we
clear.
can have a discussion there. So whether it should be a conflict condition or we should keep it as it is. Because to me, if we keep the condition as conflicted, but we still keep the traffic, it sounds like weird, but
Yeah.
we can discuss on the PR itself.
Yeah, so let me just take some notes on that. So the impact of a conflicting service on existing imported services. Okay, thanks. Does that cover that point?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Ryan, the property ladder.
Yeah, so I think it's the same thing. I just want to get more feedbacks from the APAC side because this is kind of a SIG-wide. It's kind of related to the Kubernetes thing too. It's a SIG-wide process to move certain properties from a extended to a core, or the exact definition of each ladder is still, I think there's still a lot of different opinions, but there's a higher level thing about how do we move things forward. And there are a lot of nitty-gritty details. I think I just want to bring this up on this side of the meeting so that we can get more maybe feedbacks or more suggestions on what to do or how we can yeah, some other ideas. Yeah, I think on the US side, the US EU side, we at least initially said we are going to try to see the gateway APIs project, try to mimic some of that. But I just want to bring it up so that on the APAC side, we can also have some input. I don't think I get too many inputs from the APAC side. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to summarize the current status, well, this was discussed in the last Tuesday call. We said that the main, well, at least from my perspective, the main question that really remains to be discussed and decided is voting requirements. So just for people maybe who are not 100% familiar with this KEP, the idea is to define a property ladder for cluster property with 3 tiers. The first one is pretty much what already exists, I think, in the KEP. Anybody can define a property that's not in the main sort of property namespace. So there's an extension concept for that. Then there's a standard level, which is one where, let's say, multiple implementations, but that's what's really up for discussion. So multiple people have, or projects or implementations have the same idea for a property, and so it's given a common name and a common definition. Implementations aren't required to provide it, but if they do provide the information, then they're supposed to use the common name. And consumers, if they see a property with the common name, can expect it to match the shared definition. And then the last level is required properties. So this is where everybody agrees that a property is so useful that it should be present everywhere. So same as standard properties, it has a common name and a shared definition, but all implementations are required to provide it. And so there are really 2 issues that are related to that I don't think are entirely agreed upon. The first one is that we need some sort of versioning mechanism, because consumers, for example, they have to know if they're getting a certain set of cluster properties, which definitions can they assume are applied, and same on the implementation side, there has to be a way for implementers to declare that they are now aligning with this version of the property ladder, let's say. And the other one is the voting requirements. And so there was some discussion a few weeks ago about the gateway API process, and maybe trying to define who's allowed to vote and what the voting requirement is to pass a proposal. So there was a bunch of discussion around well, here, every entity whose member collectively kept good attendance. What does that mean? And they get 1 vote. But there's still the issue of who gets 1 vote? Is it 1 per project, or is it 1 per member company? What about people who aren't doing this as part of their jobs? So on and so forth. And so that's where we get to my last comment here. Because it seems to me really that all this discussion around voting is effectively a proxy for implementations. And so maybe we can just replace it by saying that the requirement is for however many implementations to provide a property. Because it seems to me that that's at least the same amount of effort as becoming a member in good standing and being allowed to vote and then voting. In fact, it's more expensive to implement something and support it, because especially with an agreed one, well, a shared name and definition, because it means that you've managed to convince enough projects to follow that name and definition. And the other benefit I see about this is that it reduces the risk of seeing properties that sound convincing but aren't actually useful. But yeah, as Ryan says, I'm interested in, there's a lot of implementers here, so I'm interested in getting more inputs on these 2 topics. So not necessarily right now in this call if you haven't read the KEP, but please do review the KEP and add your feedback. And Ryan, you'd said, so maybe you've done it already, I haven't checked. You'd said that you would
Yeah, I haven't done that. Clean up. Yeah.
Yeah, do the cleanup and resolve because there's a bunch of conversations that are still open in the KEP there and the PR. But I don't really think not all of them are still relevant. So this one's about versioning, so I think that one's still relevant. This one's about voting, so that's still relevant. This one, so I agree with you, Ryan. I think they cover both, so that's okay. Well, I mean, extension property and additional property are different things.
Different things, yeah.
And this one here, the template.
I follow that template.
Yeah. So that can be resolved. Oh, actually, I don't have a. And then this one. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, to get back to what we're saying, Ryan said that he would clean up address some of the lower hanging fruits. In the existing discussions and update the PR. And then we can try and agree on voting and versioning and a few other things that are still remaining. But yeah, as he said, let's see, there hasn't been much input on this so far. And particularly not from people in this call. So please do take the time to look at this, because this is fairly important. I mean, cluster property is only going to be useful if it's widely used. And so it's important for different implementers to feel comfortable with the rules that we decide on in this KEP for the property ladder. Brian, do you want to add anything else on the property ladder?
No. Just really just want to get some input from the APAC side. That's it.
Okay,
But
thanks.
we brought this up.
Yeah,
I mean,
in
this
this
is new.
call.
This scenario is very new, so
Yeah.
this predated this.
Yep. Okay, and the last topic you brought up as well, KubeBind.
So it's kind of similarly. I think this to me has a same vibe that currently. I think it's just I don't know if you. Well, I'm a little bit late. I don't know if you did the like kind of the on the update on the US side is so we have a new project that is looking to get into our get hosted by SIG Multicluster, but it's a bit different from the other projects that we hosted, because the other projects, at least to me to some extent, are more or less it's our SIG's recommended or more like a endorsed one. But this one, as far as I know, it's pretty far from being a SIG endorsed one. On the other side, this is a multi-cluster project. So if they want to find a place to sit, SIG multi-cluster is clearly the place for them to be. So it similarly, we now have a discussion that what is the best way to solve this or go forward. Yeah. So that at least to me, this is not a endorsed version of in whatever sense. But what's our policy that like SIG's policy or position is I have no idea. Just again, just one point is in the APAC side, so that we also have a some input from the APAC side. Otherwise, I'm not entirely sure if the APAC side actually is even aware of this project. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. And yeah, Stephanie, you have that good talk the slides.
Good call for raising this. Thank you. It's like if there is any questions around that, I'm happy to answer basically because we've been working on this most of the time. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, so just to add to what Ryan was saying, yeah, this is a bit of a difference compared to what's different compared to, for example, having multi-cluster runtime in the SIG. So multi-cluster runtime is an extension to the well-known and commonly used controller runtime. And so even though it was marked as experimental and that, for example, it didn't have many providers, or in fact, just one provider, I think, when we added it, it was, well, we could be fairly confident that it would be the standard implementation for a multi-cluster runtime. This is slightly different. It's also marked as experimental, but it isn't like Ryan was saying, an endorsed implementation. It's more, so there are two goals as I understand it. One is to come up with a standard spec for this sort of thing, and I'll get to what this sort of thing, or maybe MJ, you can cover that, actually is, what the goal of KubeBind is. So an agreed upon spec and reference implementation, but we don't have to do both. And in fact, the reference implementation can also be split into two. There could be a reference implementation for a provider and a reference implementation for a consumer. And maybe KubeBind would end up being the SIG's reference implementation for a consumer, but not for the provider. That's all to be determined. But the way I see it, at least, the goal is to sort of provide a home for the discussion, and at least the API side of things, it's fairly clear to me, at least, that this is multi-cluster, and so SIG multi-cluster is a fairly natural home for it. And then by extension, because KubeBind as an implementation is the sort of proving ground for the spec, which doesn't really even exist yet, as a sort of catch style thing at least, then it sort of goes with it. But right, so where things stand currently, we've discussed it a few times. MJ's given a well, and others have given a presentation, a couple of presentations, I think, in the Tuesday call, and I started the discussion on the mailing list. And the only feedback I've had so far is from Tim Hawken asking why SIG-MC is the appropriate place for this, which I thought was a interesting question. I haven't written the answer yet, but anyway, MJ, do you want to explain what KubeBind is all about?
So a bit of background why we're working on this is basically we're trying to solve this, we're trying to standardize a Kubernetes KRM model for the service providers. Like how does one company provide a service and you can consume it without installing operator to every cluster? It's basically, I think this well-known pattern all around the place is syncing. When you sync status down, like status up, spec down. So ideally, we want to have a semi-standard way how one could expose a service and one could consume a service across Kubernetes clusters boundaries. And in this case, even the Kubernetes cluster as a term, as a word, kind of transcends because that becomes a control plane, like a cross-plane as a service in a way. Like a cross-plane in a way already does these things where it basically acts as a control plane, KRM enabled. It's not a cluster in a way, while the hosting technology still is. So the goal of this is basically to have this, I said, semi-agreed way. How does a handshake happens? How does the syncing happen? So, and even potentially, as mentioned, client implementation, meaning when somebody consumes a service from provider XYZ, and we use this client implementation reference syncer agent in a way, we know what it does. It's a semi-trusted component. So I know it's a bit big and ambiguous description and the goals, but that's what we're trying to solve. We're trying to make it Kubernetes services native and more adopted in a way. And yes, it's a bit odd duck. It's a different as not endorsed, but like every project, it has to start somewhere. And we feel that CNCF is just a better home to foster the conversations and have a like-minded people around.
Yeah, and so the trusted part that's an important one. I think for this to be widely accepted, there has to be a trusted component that people feel comfortable installing in their provider clusters and then consuming.
Like if to speak in layman's terms, imagine imagine the service provider contract. And that contract specifies that you as a user, you give this service access to CRD1 and name secret foo. That's it. That's the only thing customer wants to manage, the provider wants to manage in your cluster. Like one CRD and one secret with a specific name. And that agent would make sure that when the certain, in this case, API service binding object we have is created in a cluster with specified permissions, the agent makes sure that these permissions are granted, either automatically or by claims where customer says like, yes, I granted these permissions. This means on the provider side, we make sure that if customers, by using this agent, would not grant more permissions to the third party potentially than they should. But that doesn't stop again for providers to write their own implementations of agent if they feel that it's missing functionality. So it's when I talked, I cautious that that wasn't very much layman terms. Would one more demo to this in this community meeting would help? I'm conscious it might drag for a couple of weeks, but I'm conscious like I think I could do that next time.
Help in what sense?
Just to get a better understanding and grasp, or is it more question of is it should be in a SIG MC? It's like I'm just thinking, how can I help?
Yeah, as I mentioned, at least again from my standpoint, it's not really about what Kubernetes is. It's more about, my question is more about, to me, there's not really a question whether Kubernetes is endorsed or not. It cannot be SIG will not endorse this project API or implementation, at least at this point. So it's more about what type of project we will host in the, because currently we always host endorsed like the cap, approved cap in the SIG, or like one exception is controller runtime. But again, as Stefan says, it's the de facto library for everybody pretty much use to write controllers. So it's Kubernetes definitely is different. So as I said, my question is more like, what is the sixth policy on hosting? Because then there are actually, at least I know another 50 different multi-cluster projects out there. So do we accept everyone? What do we accept? It's similar, again, similar to, as I said, to the ladder thing. So now we get into some kind of, the analogy is, used to be core. Now we have extension, standard, whatever that is. So I'm not entirely sure what we go about that. That to me is my main question. Again, the reason I brought this up is we have the APAC side. I want to hear that, like, just give a background for the APAC side to give some feedback or suggestions.
Yeah, well, so it sounds like at least a demo in a couple of weeks' time could be useful. Maybe MJ, you can also explain why KubeBind is asking the SIG to host it instead of just donating the project to CNCF and maintaining the project as it currently stands.
We don't feel the project itself as it currently stands. It's enough to be donated to CNCF. It's just it doesn't have enough legs to stand on. There is still architectures to be thought, like ideas to be fostered. It's and it's not there is no vendor backing it. So like donating it would be individual donating it. It's a like-minded people gathered together and working on it. So technically, there is this legal standpoints why we like it can't be donated in a way. Plus, I said it's more. Yeah, so it's very much experimental. And if we say we need an cap for this, I think we could try to write it that in a way. I'm still trying to wrap my head. Is something like this fits the cap's definition? Maybe it does.
Yeah, I find that somewhat. I mean, it's a perfectly valid point, and but I find it somewhat amusing to see that it's, because a project isn't company backed. It's and I think it's an accurate assessment that it's unlikely to work as a project donated to the CNCF. It's
Like,
it's
I
quite.
don't know. It's like I don't know if any.
Yeah, no, I just find it slightly amusing to see that that's the case. That's where we've ended up now as a sort of ecosystem compared to where open source started.
Yes, CNCF is definitely doesn't
But-
require any company to back it, as far as I know, and probably it's the other way around. No company back probably is better.
It might be. I don't know. Like that's the point. It's
No, yeah, well, so the criteria for incubation change. So I'm not sure what the current ones are, but what they do tend to look for company involvement, and multiple companies being involved as a sort of guarantee that the project will continue. So that's why I'm saying that something that's entirely, let's say, hobbyist. It's not quite that in this case, but
Well,
yeah,
I read it.
it's,
I read it wrong. I thought no company back means it's not a single company that is like control it. It's built by multiple companies.
yeah.
That's what I thought no company backed meant.
no.
It's
It
just purely
It's
like
it's a spare
group
kind of
of
thing.
group of individuals
hobby.
who believe in this behavior of Kubernetes ecosystem, and we're just working on this for the last couple of years, like good old open source way. And as I said, we're looking where to continue this work, because we've been engaged with like SIGs and CNCF in different capacities, work. And yeah.
But anyway, so so we'll have a demo in this call, the next call in 2 weeks' time. Yeah, on the 31st. And like I said, the discussion's been started on the mailing list, so feel free to chime in there as well. And I'll do my best to get the recordings of the previous calls added to the YouTube channel as soon as possible so that people can review them there as well. Okay. So I think that's it. If anybody else, does anybody else have a topic they want to bring up? Right, I'll take silence as a no. So thanks everybody for attending, and see you either next week on the Tuesday call or in 2 weeks' time in this call.
Cool. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.